That's impressive. How do I get my kids to do that? That's fantastic. Today is Friday, January 27th, 2012. This is the Public Safety Committee, and I am joined by my colleague and fellow police officer, Dennis P. Zine.
Thank you, sir.
We've got several items. We're going to jump right to the consent calendar first, which will be a communication from the chair on items 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21 will all be sent to council.
Councilmember John White, City Clerk. Items 4 and 9 both have CAO reports that came in after the publication of the agenda. Do you wish to approve the CAO reports?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
One thing on 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21, Mr. Zine and I were discussing early this morning, was that we just encourage more folks to go out there, and these are graffiti awards where we're actually giving money to citizens for apprehending suspects, for apprehending criminals that are out there, not taking matters in their own hands, not getting involved and engaged, but calling 911 as they see graffiti, as they have leads that lead to an arrest, and it's cash in your pocket. And so $1,000, and that's what we've just awarded. $1, 2, 3, 4, 5, $6,000 this morning to local citizens for getting involved but not engaging personally, and so I wanted to share that as well. First up, we'll go ahead and take item 8 on LAPRAC. Mr. Clerk.
Item 8, CAO and CLA report relative to an agreement between the Los Angeles Police Revolver and Athletic Club and the City of Los Angeles for the lease of the LA Police Academy for $1 per year for a 55-year term.
All right. Morning.
Good morning. For the record, Jerry Miller, the Chief Legislative Analyst. I won't go into great detail on this. Page 3 of the report is an itemized list of all of the provisions of both agreements. You have a long-term lease and you have a trademark agreement before you. We're very pleased to be here today. There's been years of hard work with the LAPRAC board, with the CAO's office, my office, City Attorney, and we've resolved a lot of issues here. What's behind this is to clarify all of the property ownership, to allow us to proceed with spending $41 million of Prop Q funds to update the Academy and to resolve disputes on the trademark agreements. Now, the reason we haven't been able to spend the money on the Academy, and again, it's there, it's allocated, it could not be spent to date because of lack of clarity on clear title on the properties. And of course, unless we can get clear title on the properties, we can't spend the money. So we resolved a number of things here. We've got the long-term lease, we've got clarification on property ownership and control operations, we've got clarification on the trademark agreements, so we're happy to answer any questions.
Do most people even realize that LAPRAC is, or the Academy is not owned by the City of Los Angeles? Is this sort of public knowledge, or?
Well, the city does own parcels of the Police Academy, and LAPRAC also owns parcels at the Police Academy.
Okay.
Yes.
It's all divided up.
Right. So the majority, the main facility is on city property.
Okay. And if you could just go over some of the trademark stuff and the logos and the badge and how that's sort of going to function. How does that roll out?
Sure.
What's changing on that?
Again, what we're talking about is the badge itself, the slogan "to protect and serve," LAPD, etc. LAPRAC does use those trademarks in marketing to their members. They've got the shop at the Academy. There are various events out in the communities. They will continue to be able to use the trademarks. The intent of this agreement is for everyone to keep doing business the way they've been doing business. So they'll continue to be able to use the trademarks at no charge. The city, however, will own the trademarks, and so the city could also use those trademarks. There is protection for LAPRAC that the city doesn't eat into their revenue. It is a significant revenue source for them and for the services they provide to LAPD. So in essence, the city would own them. They would continue to have a no charge to be able to use them as they've been using them. The PPL as well, I know, uses the trademarks and at some of their events. So what we're trying to do is memorialize the way we're doing business today, but just clarify all of these issues that have stood in the way for so long.
Okay. And then in terms of restoring and restoration and putting money into the facility itself. There's already identified funds for that, and this agreement now will allow those funds to move forward?
Exactly.
That's from what I'm reading in the report. On item 12 of the report, it says the city will reimburse LAPRAC up to $400,000 for legal fees, filing fees, and other costs incurred in securing the LAPD trademarks to be payable upon receipt of the company expense documentation. I mean, is that, we're going to pay them $400,000 to...
Yes, part of the problem that's been going on for many years is the fact that LAPRAC filed for the trademarks that I just mentioned, the badge, the slogan to protect and serve, LAPD, a host of other trademarks. When that became known some years ago, I know that management at LAPD at the time was very disturbed by it. My predecessor, Ron Deaton, was concerned about it. So, in essence, and city attorney challenged their rights to actually own those trademarks. So, over the years, they have spent, and they'll have to document that they've spent this money in an effort to resolve this, to move forward, and to be able to spend the money and upgrade the academy.
So it's a true reimbursement?
It is a true reimbursement,
These
absolutely.
are actual costs?
Absolutely.
And where's the money coming from that we're paying them?
The money is coming from the CIEP fund. These are monies that are left over from a previous project.
Okay. And then, and what about any claims and liabilities that arise out of this? What's the outcome of that? If there are any?
The settlement of claims are part of the trademark agreement.
Okay. This is great. Well, I want to applaud you. I mean, this is incredibly complicated. How long have you been working on this with them?
Personally, I've been working on it for 7 years.
7 years.
Yeah.
Well, let's just hold it in committee for another couple of months. That's fantastic. And I've gone through all this. It's incredibly complicated, but well needed. There's a lot of negotiation here. I've certainly heard from a lot of the LAPRAC board members, as well as the PPL who've weighed in on this. Everybody thinks it's a great idea. Everybody's applauding everyone because it was so complicated to get all these agreements done. And meanwhile, the academy is suffering because there's money that needs to be spent to restore and repair some of the buildings and some of the infrastructure there that's just falling apart. And so now we'll be able to do that, which is great. So I applaud your efforts on that. You've certainly got my support. Mr. Zine, do you have any questions on this?
Just a couple. Prop Q, it started with $36.2 million. It's up to $41 million. Was there interest gained along the process as this has been waiting for some resolution?
The Proposition Q fund started with a bond issuance of 600. It's gone up to 699 million. So that's 99 million. So that's how we were able to increase the size of that project from the 4.8 that was originally set. 4.8 million that was originally set aside in the original program. We used interest accrued to increase that budget to the full.
And I do want to be clear. This is not taking money away from any other project. Every single Prop Q project that was promised to the voters has been done.
Is this the last to be completed under Prop Q?
This is the last large project. There are other projects that have been, you recently added a project, Northeast Station, so there's a refurbishment in Northeast that's going on as well. Those are added projects from what was promised to the voters. So everything that the city promised the voters has been done. What we're now talking about is interest earnings and savings from projects and going to other priorities for the department.
And the renovations, will that then bring the academy up to current standards, ADA and all the other requirements?
Yes.
So this improvement will then take care of it for the next so many years?
Yes.
And we're not going to be short because of some lack of funding?
No, that was the intent of expanding the project, was to address all health and safety, ADA, all those requirements at the site.
Now, what happens with the Jack Webb building and the others that were donated by other entities?
The Jack Webb building is technically owned by the Los Angeles Police Academy Trust. Those board members are appointed by the LAPRAC board, and they have agreed that they will be appointing board members to quit claim that as well to the city. That building is in a lot of disrepair. It is not salvageable, and that will be the site of the training building.
So that will come down?
That will come down.
And the shooting ranges and all the others? Those
The
will-
shooting ranges are part of that 41 million improvement.
Okay, long time in coming.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. And the city attorney, I remember working on the city attorney many, many years ago. Total time, how long from the beginning till now on this issue with the trademark? 7, 10, 15 years?
Oh, gosh. I know it was an issue that was being discussed when I came to the CLA's office in 1998. I don't know how.
Dragging on before that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll go ahead and move this on to council as well.
Approval?
Approval. Thank you.
Very good.
All right. Next item we're going to take is item 1, which is a $200,000 anti-piracy grant. And my first question is, have you been investigating the infringement of the trademark of the LAPD badge and what LAPRAC's been... No, I'm kidding. We'll go ahead, and I know Mr. Zine had some questions on that, so we'll throw it over to Mr. Zine.
Well, I didn't know we had a pirate squad, but that's out of what section?
Is that of Detective Vice's Support Division?
And how many folks assigned to that?
I'll let Detective handle it.
Good morning,
He's in
Board.
charge of the case.
My name is Ricky Shitani. I'm a detective supervisor. I'm one of the supervisors in the Anti-Piracy unit, and we have a total of 6 personnel.
And you do citywide or just certain areas of the city?
Citywide plus any nexus to the city of Los Angeles will go outside.
Okay. And you're all pirates, so you're called the Pirate Squad.
That was a name that we pretty much came up with at the beginning of it in 2004 when Chief Bratton adopted us.
Okay. Has there been any publicity that this squad exists to try and counter some of the problems that we're dealing with?
Yes, sir. We've been published in the United States President's Administration newspaper. We also have been on CNBC, Crime Inc., 60 Minutes, 2020, Nightline, Dateline, name it. We were at the forefront representing the city of Los Angeles with the LAPD Anti-Piracy Unit.
And you work for a fine commander.
Yes, sir.
All right, that's all I had.
Do you have, just real quick then, do you have a challenge coin? No. Do you have...
I'll get you one.
Got to add to the collection.
The Pirate
A
Squad.
pirate challenge coin would be pretty cool. In all seriousness, is there any costs? Is it fully 100% grant funded? Or are there costs associated with this out of the general fund or out of the department? Or is this grant that's being accepted covering full cost recovery for the staff,
The grant pays for the overtime that I believe it's 5 detectives and 1 police officer that they accrue during that. Our matching part is the salaries and the benefits of the detectives that are currently in the unit. So any overtime that they accrue working on intellectual properties, that's covered by the grant.
Terrific. Okay. All right. Be safe out there. Thank you. We'll go ahead and move this with approval as well.
Thank you.
All right. The next item we're going to take is item 10, the cost to occupy. Well, first of all, before I get into that, there are speaker cards here filled out. And I wanted to remind everybody and let them know in case they're sitting here that we legally cannot fulfill the obligation, the legal requirement under the Brown Act for public comment without a full quorum of this committee. We do not have currently a quorum of this committee. This committee consists of, it's a 5-member committee, but right now, because there's a vacancy, it's a 4-member committee, which means that we would have to actually have 3 members present. And so unless Ms. Perry or Mr. Krikorian are present as well with Mr. Zine, then we don't legally fulfill the obligation. What that means, for those of you who are new here today, that don't understand the Brown Act or aren't familiar with that part of it, is that any item that's moved out of this committee onto the full city council is required by law to have public comment. And so it'll be agendized before the full city council for an item that has not yet had public comment. And you'll have the opportunity at council then to speak at public comment. But right now we don't have that legal obligation filled to have public comment. So if you've waited here and you have a public comment card, I appreciate it. I appreciate you coming down this morning. You're happy to stay. But we do have several cards here filled out that don't meet that obligation. So moving on.
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
This is the second meeting that I remember we didn't have a full quorum. Is there the future, do we hope to have a quorum so we can
Yes.
do this in the...
My understanding are the new committee assignments are going to be out by Tuesday. And there will be, this committee will change slightly from what I've heard. I don't know exactly what those are, and when we see them in writing, we'll know. But my understanding is with those changes, we will start meeting with a full committee. So thank you for that. On that note, we're going to go ahead and go on to item 10, the costs of Occupy. With that, This was a motion that I introduced because there was a policy discussion and a vote. I did not vote on that to allow and recognize the Occupy movement to stay on the lawn at City Hall. Now, one of the things that the motion instructed that passed through the City Council without my vote was that the movement was going to secure the necessary payments and pay the fees accordingly. That never happened, and they were there for roughly 2 months. With that, there were numerous costs incurred, both regular costs, in addition to standard operating costs, overtime, equipment, supplies, repair, et cetera, with a lot of different departments. The reports here that have been presented show that there's been roughly $2.3 million, but there are several items missing, and this is not yet up to date, so I wanted to find out where we're at on this.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Tyler Munhall with the CAO. We do have some updates on the costs. Should I just get to those right away?
Do you have anything in writing you can submit for the record as well?
I just got some of them
Okay.
before committee, so not yet, but we can report back.
Well, walk me
in
through what
writing.
you've got, and then we'll report back.
All right. As you said, the total cost that we reported on the 23rd of December were $2.3 million. Of that, additional costs were $1.7 million. Those are above normal operating costs, mostly for overtime for LAPD. The police costs that were reported were an estimate, and we do have better numbers on that. Total overtime that was paid out was $1,247,244. There was $224,000 in banked overtime that was not paid out, so that's a total of $1.4 million in overtime. Supplies slightly changed, went down a little bit, so the new total is for police is $1,500,236.
But that lacks the standard operating costs.
Correct.
And you don't have that yet?
The department is here. I'm not sure if that's available yet or not.
I also understand that the department, as an unrelated item, has yet to submit, per charter, their draft budget to the budget team for next fiscal year's budget as well. Do you have any information on that? February 7th, it's going to the Board of Police Commissioners, and it was due when? Okay. Well, with that, why don't we go ahead and table this item until you can come back with all the costs, the standard operating costs as well, and the restoration costs, I know, are still out there as they're projecting exactly what to do with the lawn. I know there's a lot of discussions on that. We'll go ahead and table this item. How long do you think it will be to come back with that information?
Laura Luna, Command Officer, Fiscal Operations, LAPD. We had significant difficulty getting the accurate costs for the on-duty personnel assigned to Occupy LA. We don't have a system in place that we can pick up the number of hours that those people that were assigned were actually assigned that day on that event. The problem we had was people who came in that day and started working and then were assigned over to Occupy LA, backing out the hours that they were doing other stuff other than Occupy LA. We have a listing of everybody that was engaged in the activity, but we can't pick up the number of hours. And we're working on a system, dedicated to Occupy LA.
How long will it, do you think it'll take?
The data was so poorly, the raw data that we received doesn't give us the information for us to calculate that, if you were there, if you came in that morning to work your regular duty and patrol, and then you were assigned over to Occupy LA, maybe 5 or 6 hours of your time shouldn't be charged to Occupy LA. We don't have...
Yeah, but those are all filled out every day the officers fill that out on their assignments and where they're at, how long they're there, when they're going to leave, all that's keyed in on their logs,
On the
the daily
logs.
logs.
We had
are
over
all filled out?
2,000 employees that were there.
Did they not fill out logs?
The logs were filled out. The 214, which is a form that's used to capture costs for these type of events, were not completely filled out. And so that night, when everybody was getting everything happened so quickly, the forms were not properly filled
Okay.
out. So it's nearly impossible for us to go back and give you a good cost. It's all soft costs.
This
There wasn't
doesn't-
any additional dollars. I understand your frustration. Believe me, this has been an ongoing frustration that I've been dealing with for years of getting accurate, good data. It's sort of in a position where the parade has already gone down, and I'm trying to go back and clean it up, and I don't have what I need to clean it up. So we're working on something. We have a meeting with the command staff in a couple of weeks to get a system in place that we can be able to do this. This particular incident really highlighted to the department how lacking we were in a way to capture the cost of on-duty personnel. Overtime, no
Okay.
problem.
I'm going to go ahead and table this, probably ask for the audit committee at the next meeting and ask for an audit of the department on this as well from this incident, and bringing in outside auditors to look at the daily logs and what's been captured and not, to look at actual costs. It sounds like this is going to be a bigger issue than it should have been. We've had the ability to do this on every other incident that I'm aware of, and so with that, we'll go ahead and table this
Okay.
for the next public safety meeting, instead of just I asked how long you think it would take. I was going to extend that period of time, whether it be 2 weeks or 30 days. We'll go ahead and table it 1 week so we can get some real answers, and we'll table it every week until we can get the answers of exactly where are these daily logs,
Yeah.
how can they be done either manually or not. This is a major issue. When we're looking at about a $250 million structural deficit going into next year and a $75 million deficit finishing this fiscal year, and trying to figure out where we're spending our money, and there's policy decisions being made, whether it's to support certain movements or not, these decisions come with a cost. And unless the policymakers, the council members, and other policymakers can have the information on what it's going to cost to either support or oppose these movements or initiatives, then they can't make informed decisions. The department's responsibility is to capture this information and data. They've been able to do it with every other event.
Right.
We were able to do it and threaten lawsuits against AEG for the Michael Jackson funeral, wherever that might be. We were able to do it in trying to figure out what it cost to shut down Carmageddon during the 405 closure. We're able to do it on almost every other event,
Right.
Except for this one.
Right.
And so I'd like to table this for 1 more week and come back with some real information, or perhaps at that point, if it can't be obtained, we'll look at bringing in an audit.
Okay. The distinction between this event and other events, so those were pre-planned events that we had planning 2 and 3 months ahead of time, and so we were able to better capture that data. This thing ramped up very, very quickly, and and this is where we need that information, but we were trying to get
Okay,
this
so well, then we'll have to
in place.
find out, what did we do differently to capture data in those instances? Where were those daily logs filled out differently? Or what did we do differently in this situation? We also knew that that they were there for some time before the motions came in on the council. We had to deploy and put together action plans on where the officers were going to come from, who was going to be deployed there, their hours of operation, their missions, what we were going to do. There was a lot of planning that went into dismantling the movement as well. And so it doesn't sound all that much different, and so we'll have to get to the bottom of that and actual cost and what we spent on it, and that's what the motion asked for.
Okay.
So we'll go ahead and table it for 1 week, unless Mr. Zine's got some questions as well.
Just a point, I noticed that they're trimming trees in the area surrounding City Hall, in the area that was occupied. So there's movement that's taking place now where they're doing renovation. They've cleaned out the trash, they're doing renovation, they've trimmed the trees, which I don't think should be charged off to Occupy LA if they're doing regular maintenance. So we need to separate that out, but somehow movement's going forward with the area that's being attended to. So when we talk about the cost, if it's $2 million or $3 million, whatever the case may be, we need to separate those costs out. Normal maintenance, trimming trees that have grown over a period of time, it's not the problem of Occupy LA. So we need to be honest and accurate when we're talking about the numbers.
And we can break those out in the report. If you look at the attachment of the preliminary costs and the estimates, it does a good job at that. And again, if we're looking at standard operating costs as well, the same argument could be made that those folks had to work, they're going to be somewhere anyway. But it's still taking away from other duties and responsibilities that they would be doing. And so it will be broken out from the way it's done. It could be interpreted from a different perspective by many different individuals. So we're looking at just the totality of the costs of what occurred during those 60 days and the restoration and cleanup. I don't believe tree trimming was in here, and probably nor should it be, but it's a good point.
Now, somehow it's being done. I don't know who's paying for it, but it's being done now.
It's coming out of the CD3 tree trimming expenditure account, I think.
It's not, that wouldn't be reflected in here since it's a cost that's happening now after the report. But we did in our directions to departments clearly specify that they should only be looking at costs related to Occupy LA. And by separating out normal operating or regular operating costs, we tried to show that those costs would have been incurred whether the protests occurred or not.
Right.
They would have been, those employees would have been working on something. Just one note, in terms of how this might impact the deficit, we don't have, it's going to be handled in the mid-year FSR. At least at this point, the only department that's going to need an additional allocation is police. We haven't heard back from all departments.
And that's the one that's not letting us know how much we've spent. And then the other part of that,
that's for the overtime.
for overtime, I got that. But the other part of that is, again, going into the position of a policy or the council in the future making any decisions, and this information needs to go into the decision-making process of what's it going to cost, not just over and above normal day-to-day activity, but the totality of even standard operating costs, because standard operating cost means that if you have an officer or a sanitation worker or whoever that might be stationed there at one location or performing a function, that means they're not somewhere else performing a function, so we're paying for that. And so that's why we need this information. It's critically important. So we'll go ahead and bring it back. And at that note, we'll bring this back next week. We'll table it, and we're going to move on to items 11 and 12.
Can I clarify something that the CAO provided in terms of our costs for overtime?
We can do that next week once we have more information. That would be great.
Council member, my name is Leo Martinez from Bureau of Sanitation. I have prepared some reports for the committee to discuss or clearly outline sanitation's expenditures for Occupy LA. If you'd like to review that this morning, or I can leave them with the committee.
Oh, great. Terrific. And is there something you can leave behind as well?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much. We'll enter it into as part of the record. Since we're going to table this and keep it open, now we'll have that, and we can have you present it. We can publish it, and if we get a copy of it, if we can get a copy electronically as well, so we can put it up with the council file, that would be terrific. And then so we can have full transparency and the public can see it as well, particularly since you put so much work into it.
Thank you so much.
We'll have the opportunity to review it and then discuss it next week's meeting as well.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much. All right. Items 11 and 12. We're going to take together on the tsunami plan and siren costs. Morning.
Morning, sir.
You'd state your name and position for the record, and those listening in as well. That would be terrific.
Morning. Jim Featherstone, General Manager of the Emergency Management Department.
So on our emergency operations plan, tsunami, functional support, and what emergency management is doing, first of all, I want to compliment you before you even go into this report and bring us up to date on the latest and what's been going on, and just saying that you've been doing a phenomenal job. We're blessed to have you. You seem to be everywhere ahead of the emergencies, which is great, and the department. And I think we're one of the best organized cities in the country in terms of getting in front of our emergency plans and operations, our collaboration with all of our public safety and first responding partners, and you're the lead on that. So if you can walk us through these two reports, that'd be terrific.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. The Emergency Operations Board approved the Tsunami Annex, which actually was the culmination of work that started about 5 years ago. And in fact, later on in full council, we will announce that we are now a tsunami and storm-safe city, as certified by the National Weather Service.
So what does that mean? Are we at risk ever of even having a tsunami? Could that happen?
Absolutely, we are at risk. But what the tsunami safe and storm safe city certification does is it shows that we've done the work and the due diligence to prepare the community in terms of information. We have safe evacuation routes, signage. We have a series of inundation maps that show the areas most at risk, and those are the areas targeted by the study. We got significant support from Councilmember Rosendal's office in moving this initiative forward. And later on in full council, you also hear from Mr. Eric Bolt. He's the senior weather forecaster from National Weather Service up in Oxnard. We work hand in glove with him, not just on tsunami issues, but any weather-related events we may have. We have senior staff at EMD has a pick up the phone and have a conversation with him kind of relationship anytime, day or night. So this report, this annex actually going back to the process, was handled in subcommittee, went through the Emergency Operations Board approval process, and then it comes forward to council. It now becomes part of the city's Emergency Operations Master Plan and annexes.
And in terms of the city's operation manual and emergency plans, I know that CD12, my office, has an emergency plan. We've actually asked your office to review it and go through it as well. You've done that, and we appreciate the support.
Yes, sir.
You know if every council office has their own internal emergency plan? Have you reached out to them to find out if they have anything similar?
We've reached out to all the council offices. In fact, CD12 was one of the first offices to actually come through. We actually have a specific council office emergency operations training. It's about, I think, 2.5 hours. We do the outreach, but we also like to have the council staffs come through, and we do a briefing there, especially council members who are part of the chain of succession for running the city in the crisis.
Have we done that in the last 2 years for every council office? I mean, it sounds like it should be probably a 2-year cycle.
Yes, sir. We haven't done it with every council office. We've left it up to the respective council member to come in. I think we have Councilmember Wesson's team is coming in next week. I think it's been about 10 months since CD12 came through. But what's happened is a lot of council offices have found it convenient to hold their staff meeting at our facility and then go through the training at the same time, which has been really good. A lot of questions answered and asked, and it also develops a better relationship between EMD and the council offices.
Terrific. Well, we're the only council office, I believe, that all staff are certified as well as a requirement of working in CD12. We're throwing out that challenge here today to Mr. Zine, see if he bites on it. But
I don't think the tsunami is going to hit the 12th district.
We never know.
Maybe an earthquake, but not a tsunami.
Never know. The 12th district has been the epicenter of disaster in the city of Los Angeles. It has been ground zero for floods and earthquakes, for fires, for train accidents. You name it, and it happens in CD12. That's right. And so you never know. A tsunami, if it's big enough, can certainly come across the San Fernando Valley. We do have a buffer between us and the ocean. We call that Mr. Zine's house, CD12 and CD3. And so we're a little set off from that, but you never can prepare for enough and be over-prepared. So with that, I appreciate this. I think it's more important that we spend the quality time going through this before the full city council rather than committee. So I'd like to move this forward to the council for a full presentation, as you suggested as well, so all council members can be part of that discussion and the community will hear it as well, unless Mr. Zine's got any particular questions on this issue.
I saw the some evacuation route signs. I was in San Pedro recently, and it was interesting to see that. I know I've seen it in other parts of the country, so it was interesting to see that, a tsunami evacuation route. People aren't familiar with that. here on the West Coast, familiar with it in other parts of the country, but it's obviously we learned from Japan the tragedy that happened there. You look at the video, and it's unimaginable. So it's a movie. People don't believe it was actually happening until they really look at the impact. So with earthquake, the nuclear, and then the tsunami, it was just total devastation. So obviously, something we have to pay attention to. You never know what's going to happen. So.
I was in Japan in early December, and we went to Sendai, the area that was most photographed on the news, and they were saying there was definitely a disproportionate number of survivor stories with the younger folks, especially school children, who had taken the tsunami training to heart and went up or took or their families took the evacuation routes. So the tsunami education paid off. It was a catastrophic event, but they would have much more deaths if people hadn't heeded the tsunami preparation training.
Yeah. Very tragic.
Okay. Thank you. One thing on item 12, I'd like to move item 11 to the council on 12. Are there any actual costs for the coastal region for alarm installation? Have we looked at opportunities, perhaps even for some grant funding? And
we look for every grant opportunity we can find. In fact, I think right now we're managing about $19 million in grant projects. And I would be more than happy to manage $19 million in grant money. There's a significant cost associated with tsunami sirens. EMD agrees with the concept of tsunami sirens. There's a significant cost associated with it. Also, if we go the route of tsunami sirens, then tsunami warning sirens, we also need to come up with a disabilities an alternative for the disabled community, members of the community who have hearing impairment. So then we start to get into more technological issues, which increases the cost. Like to reiterate, we support tsunami sirens or audible warnings of some sort, but at this time, our research shows significant cost. So we're trying to look at alternatives in terms of technology and also alternatives in terms of funding. I would venture to say it's not something that the general fund would even look at this time.
Not during the current crisis. Unfortunately, you know, everything we can do for emergency preparedness, if we can put all the money towards that, we would. We've got a lot of other responsibilities as well. But with that, I would ask then that we receive and file that motion, but we ask EMD to continue looking for any opportunities for grant funding and things we can do, that there may be an opportunity to bring that type of technology to the forefront as well. Here in council chambers downstairs, we have a new, for those of you who, some of you are aware, an earthquake warning system. So when there's an earthquake that hits Los Angeles, and this building is affected, Mr. Zine he stands up and yells, "Earthquake, earthquake, earthquake," 3 times, and that's our new early warning system. It's very expensive, but it works. It's
Thank you,
effective.
John and Ken at KFI.
All right.
I've got a question regarding that, though. The old air raid sirens and what they use in San Onofre and some of the coastal areas where they have we looked at try and use some of that technology, or there's still some of those out in the community? Could we relocate those along the coastal routes and use that as a true shortstop solution?
That's an option. We actually did look at the old air raid siren, because I grew up with the air raid sirens. Most of them are in such disrepair that to move them, it would actually be cheaper to buy new, more contemporary hardware. But the network or their placement would be a good point of departure, a good baseline to start from. We'd have to change it because demographics have shifted since the era of the Cold War. But that basic network would be foundational to a siren system along the coastal area.
What do they use in Florida and other parts of the country for the warning system?
They use, I don't know, they use the sirens, but they actually leverage the commercial media. They have a very, in fact, well, Japan uses, when they have, Sendai had a 30-some minute warning of the tsunami through a buoy system. We have a very accurate and very robust buoy system along the West Coast. So the National Weather Service and NOAA actually can anticipate a tsunami. And Japan uses the professional media. They also have, if the citizens register, they get a text message, an email, and a robocall on their cell phone and their home phones. So that's something we were looking at. We visited the Japanese Meteorological Agency in Tokyo, and they talked to us a lot about tsunami early warning and earthquake early warning, which they're the leaders in the world in terms of those two warning systems. They tie their governmental warning system in with the private warning system, so the country is blanketed by a notification system. They don't use, they have some sirens, but they depend mainly on the electronic media to notify people.
Yeah, we do have that ability through the LA County Sheriff's Department, the emergency alert system.
Alert LA County.
Yeah.
And we've used that in the hillside areas for mud and debris flow issues.
All right, thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Sir.
Item 13, Mr. Clerk.
Item 13, motion Englander, Labange et al., instructing the police, fire, and emergency management departments, the Departments of Public Works and Transportation, DWP, and other departments as necessary to report relative to ongoing efforts to achieve interdepartmental and multi-jurisdictional emergency preparedness coordination and related matters.
Morning.
Morning.
Good morning again.
Morning,
You have a twin.
Council Member. Jim Featherstone, General Manager of the Emergency Management Department.
Phil Fontanetta, Captain, LAPD, Emergency Operations.
Assistant Chief Michael Little, Homeland Security Division, LA Fire Department.
Randy Howard, LADWP, Director of Power System Planning and Development.
Great, thank you. Thanks for coming out this morning on this. This is critically important, looking at interagency coordination, communications, interoperability, looking at ways, particularly during major disasters or even minor disasters, but when we have no power, no ability to communicate with the general public, what we're doing to enhance and improve those efforts, looking at the winds that came through in December, and with all the power outages and the lack of communication from other agencies. I think we've done a pretty good job, quite frankly, but there were other cities that didn't do as great as LA. But there's always room for improvement. Wanted to find out what we're doing for interagency coordination and correspondence, opportunities for grant funding for tabletop exercises and outreach. A lot of folks said that one of the chief complaints that came out of that disaster was that there wasn't an email push system to get information about power outages. And of course the response from the general public was, unless you have a smartphone or something, how are you supposed to get your email if you have a power outage? So what are we doing to answer all those issues, look at exercises, opportunities for drills, and participate and partner with neighborhood councils, community-based organizations, churches and synagogues, et cetera, for communication in these efforts?
Yes, sir. The City of Los Angeles is part of what's known as the Big City Emergency Managers Group, and it's the 15 most populous and most at-risk jurisdictions in the nation. BCEM actually represents 30% of the nation's population. I would say, being an active member of that group, that the City of Los Angeles interagency, multi-agency collaboration coordination is probably the best in the nation. This didn't happen, didn't just happen, and it didn't happen overnight, but through a series of trainings and ongoing relationships, we've developed this probably over the last 5 or 6 years. It wasn't bad 5 or 6 years ago. Right now, I would say that we are a model big city in terms of multi-agency coordination and collaboration. For example, Tuesday of this week, we held our 25th Public Safety Brown Bag Lunch. Once a month, the police, fire, the port, LAPD, LAX, TSA, FBI, Coast Guard, we all get together and for 90 minutes have an informal discussion about current and potential public safety issues in our area. It's just sleeves rolled up, sandwich in one hand, soft drink in the other hand.
Those sandwiches weren't purchased outside of the city. We had a sandwich gate we won't talk about.
Jensen's in Wrightwood.
That's right.
Now, we never forget the bad.
Yes, sir.
Just making sure.
They bring their own lunches. Jim Featherstone buys the chips out of his own pocket.
Ohio Patrol's there too?
Yes. Like I said, we have the brown bag lunch, planned events. We do a unified planning process for issues like presidential visits, the VPOTUS visit. Occupy LA was a unified planning effort. The unified planning effort right now is underway for the Emmys, the Oscars.
Define, if you could, take a step back. What's a unified planning effort?
The unified planning effort is that we have multiple agencies involved in planning for the response to that event. And if we have a no-notice event, we usually start with a citywide conference call. We have 20 to 25 agencies on the conference call. Everybody weighs in, and we talk about what the current situation is, what the potential situation is, if there are any gaps, and everybody gets to hear what everyone else is doing. If we need to sidebar and develop more specific collaborations, that's handled. We have...
So is it treated any different if you've got a planned event versus a spontaneous event in terms of the collaboration, bringing everybody together, coming up with action plans, tactics, tracking on exactly what you're doing in a post-action item to figure out what you did wrong or what you did right? Or is that all the same?
We treat it almost the same because we look at the planned events as, we call it sets and reps. We exercise what we need to do in the planned events because most of them are initially benign. But that interaction and the processes we use in the planned events are very, very, very similar to what we use in no-notice events. So, for example, we had the Occupy LA issue that happened Tuesday night at midnight, and the same processes, the planning, the mobilization, the tracking, the situational awareness issues were used a couple of days later at 5:30 in the morning for the wind event on that Thursday morning.
Okay.
So that week
because in just asking, and I don't want to relate the two, and this is critically important, but the response earlier from LAPD on the costs and tracking, it was that almost each day was treated as a spontaneous event, even though it was a period over 2 months. And I know that's a whole other issue, but when we start looking at the costs associated with response and communication and tabletop exercises and then actual events as they occur, and collaboration and interagency coordination and all the costs associated with that, but also how we did. All of what I'm hearing is we do track all that information.
Yes.
And so with that, what about reaching out to the general public? So if we have, that was sort of the complaint that came from the media, was that it's great that we have a lot of these agencies communicating with each other. They certainly know what they're doing. The public doesn't. And when not if, but when the big earthquake does hit, or tsunami, or whatever that might be here in Southern California, the biggest issue is going to be letting people know that they have to shelter in place, take care of themselves. There may not be an opportunity for a first responder to get there right away, or even for a matter of days, that they should be stockpiling food and water, and we try to put that information out there regularly. I certainly do out of my office and our newsletters and outreach coordination with community organizations. What do we do to communicate with them? We have no power, they have no television, no radio, no internet, which is the case what happened with the windstorms. What do we do to get to the mass public all this information?
I think the foundation is our messaging over time. Be prepared. If our citizenry are prepared for the earthquake, they more than likely will be prepared for almost any other hazard that we go through. So the messaging over time, things like for power outage, of course, everybody has cordless phones now. And in our preparedness messaging, we urge people to have an old school plug-in phone.
Right.
When the power goes out, that phone still works. The other thing is, on the preparedness side, if our citizens register with Alert LA County for the notification system, that when we have a crisis, we use Twitter, Facebook, and 3 different websites. So if we have power, we're still able to get information out. We have an agreement with the Electronic Billboard Consortium.
But I go back to this. If we've got a lot of power outages and we're using Twitter and Facebook, electronic billboards, all the things that require
Power.
what do we do old school to get messages out there, to let folks know when power is going to be restored, what evacuation plans are, what hospitals are open or not, or whatever information they need to get that help is on the way? How do we get that and push that information out there without the either utilization of technology or in the event of a power outage?
What we have in place is when we actually have a massive power outage greater than what we've seen so far, and we're actually looking at moving it, lowering the threshold for when we do, is actually have with the response agencies to go out and use old-fashioned bullhorns or megaphones or vehicle-mounted PA systems to notify the public that power's out. In some instances, an area that, and we use this during the mud and debris flow issues in the hillside, is actually do actual live door knocks. If citizens have an old school plug-in telephone, the Alert LA County system will actually do a robocall. We can notify them through
That's
that.
the reverse 911?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And is there a way to, do we have any types of regional disaster communication plans where we've got, for example, in each battalion or each police division, where they've got a list of perhaps CERT certified or neighborhood council or VST members that they can get a hold of to help spread words through synagogues or churches or whatever that might be? Is there a plan now for that, or is there one in the works?
Well, I'll give this to Chief Little, but one thing I wanted to say was that the neighborhood councils, and they vary on their level of readiness, but the neighborhood councils are a significant network for getting the message out. I mean, that's what you have to depend on. There's not enough government to do everything in a crisis situation, but established networks like neighborhood councils or the CERT program or the neighborhood outreach that LAPD does, that's how the message will get out.
Yeah, and really, feeding back on what Jim stated, much of this is based on the pre-event messaging and training that goes on. Certainly the CERT training that we've conducted, I think we're have to be approaching 25,000, perhaps more than that. The disaster awareness course activities that are being performed, and the contacts that are established at the battalion level with certainly the faith-based groups, the various councils and so forth, that allow us to get that messaging out. In the event of a total power outage, of course, we're going to be reliant on people having radios and these things that are also part of our messaging. Certainly everyone has portable devices which may or may not be impacted, but with the redundancies that are in place of the Twitter, Facebook, the various websites, our hope would be that we're going to get our messages to the lion's shares of those that would be involved in the the emergency response efforts and recovery efforts.
In terms of tabletop exercises, and I'll just close with this and turn it over to Mr. Zine if he's got any questions as well. I know we have the Great Shakeout every year, and it's a tremendous success. I think 7 million people signed up online last year in California to participate, and we've taken a tremendous lead in that in the city of Los Angeles, so I applaud your efforts in that as well. Have we done anything in terms of an exercise with saying we're going to have Emergency Day LA, for example, and do our own exercise with those neighborhood council groups we already have online, as well as the faith-based organizations or whatever that might be, as from one time period for an hour, whatever that is, an annual sort of tabletop test to have a broadcast out there, get the media involved. Is there an opportunity to do something like that so we can actually test what we've been laying the groundwork for? And if so, and if we should do something like that, perhaps we should look at, certainly will be a cost involved in putting that together as well. Would you think that may be worth looking at?
Absolutely, especially since this is the year of preparedness. I mean, the messaging that this is a year of preparedness, it makes sense for us to have a culminating or a series of culminating events. We were looking at my shop. We've been talking about looking at something late fall, early winter, just because it takes that much time to spin up on something that widespread. But I think the year of preparedness won't matter unless we get to a point where we say, okay, how are we in terms of how prepared? I asked that question in Japan, too, at the folks at Tohoku University. They do all their disaster research. I said, how do you measure preparedness? And they all went, aha, and just kind of, they're still trying to measure preparedness, but they know it's something you just have to keep working at. But in answer to your question, Council Member, yes, we can and we will do a series of culminating events late fall, early winter for the communities. Last year we had a 4-suite exercise series for the citywide exercise process. We started in June with an emergency logistics tabletop. August we had a command and control tabletop. We had a functional exercise in November, and then we had a huge EOC, DOC exercise in December. And the theme last year was a terrorist event. We look at multiple terrorist events. We feel that the City of LA, the County of LA, our region can respond to the significant event fairly well. But in light of what happened in Mumbai, India, and what happened in Japan, we're looking at how do we respond to multiple significant events that happen near simultaneously. So we're looking at what's called the meta scenario. This year's theme.
What do you refer to that as? I'm sorry.
The meta scenario.
Okay.
So where we have multiple significant events happening near simultaneously. This year's earthquake, and we're not just doing the typical earthquake where we got a collapsed building, but there are a number of associated significant incidents that happened, as we saw in Japan. They had earthquake, tsunami, and radiological issue. So we haven't, the exercise team hasn't surprised us with what the bad stuff will be this year, but we start in June, August, and December, we'll have a 3-exercise suite for city and our partner agencies. But I'm saying all that to get to the point that we will also do a community-based culminating event for the year of preparedness, late fall, early winter.
Terrific. Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Mr. Zine.
Yeah, the aspect of human behavior, and as we saw the tragedy in Italy with the ship, with the rock, and some people obviously survived, others didn't. They didn't have their act together. They didn't give the folks on that ship the procedure in case something happens. It's a 24-hour span, which they can do. I'm sure they'll change that. But the human behavior, and what we have done is with the fire department, we got some surplus radios, which we're working with the neighborhood councils to give them those radios in the event of a situation. And it really comes down to the local neighborhoods, the local communities. And when you have your local neighborhoods and your block captains to the police department, the neighborhood watch programs, my district, we have a posse program where there's 400 people who have been trained. So you put it all together, the CERT teams, when you pull it all together, it's really on an individual neighborhood basis. And if it's 3 o'clock in the morning and everyone's sleeping, they wake up, everyone's there. If it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they're at work downtown, the family is in the valley, the children are at school. The thing is that we keep on trying to tell them is be prepared. Be prepared for 72 hours. And then there's that link when the freeway collapses and you can't get to your destination, as we saw what happened in the Northridge earthquake, and Wayne Dean, the police officer who was rushing to work on his motorcycle and died in that tragedy. But the bottom line is we keep on reminding them to be prepared, and then they'll be shocked when they hear something, when they hear about the tsunami in Japan or the cruise ship. Now people are going to go on a cruise, they're going to be more aware, more attuned to that, but it's just reminding them constantly. In human behaviors, we got to convince them that it's possible, it's likely, we don't know when, but we've had the earthquakes, we've had the tragedy, we've had the fires, the mountain fire district that we, Mr. Taylor and I both represent. So it's just that constant reminding, and then have the resources available with the agencies, the public safety agencies, whether it be the police, the fire, the county fire, the city fire works together, unifying command. And we're doing the best we can with the resources we got. We can't solve it all, but we can keep on training, exercising, and trying to link it together. The LA RICS program, the communications network, we're trying to pull it all together, which has been dragging on for about 10 years. But I think what we have is the opportunity to inform people, to educate people, and to let them know that you're going to have to take care of yourself for a certain period of time. We'll do what we can when these fires break out. And Mr. Englander and I was up at the fires in Northridge the last time when we couldn't get fire rigs over because they were over in Sylmar. We couldn't get them over to Northridge and to Granada Hills and Porter Ranch. And we were out there with garden hoses, putting out some of the fires in the backyards, calling for fire units, and there were no fire trucks, because they were all tied up on another fire. So, you know, we have to do what we have to do, but as far as the public safety agencies, they're doing everything they can to make it work, but there's no magic solution, there's no magic wand to say, we're going to solve it all overnight. And the human behavior is just going to have to be trained to understand, and every resource we've got, you folks are doing a great job pulling the resources together, but we rely on your neighbors, your community, and people work together. It's just like with the fire hoses, and as we're using these garden hoses, putting out these fires in the back of homes, the helicopter comes by and dumps water. So
On top of us, by the way, so,
But it was good. It
I
was
think
good.
we might have
But
to
it's
have,
neighborhoods getting together to do something for themselves and their fellow humans. That's what it's really about.
just for the record on that, so everybody has the history on it, I think we might want LAFD to report back at some time in the future
I don't think so.
about water dropping helicopters on top of police officers that are trying to help put fires out with garden hoses. It took days to dry out from that event. But in any event,
But
thank
they were
you.
there. They did the job.
They did their job. They did a great job. Appreciate you coming back and reporting back, and look forward to presenting this to the council as well. And thank you again for...
And there's no rivalry. I mean, the thing about it is there's no rivalry. They're all working together for the people. So it's not like we're the county, we're the city, we're the Highway Patrol, we're the city. I mean, when you have unified command, everybody pulls together, which is the positive part about what this region really represents. I know in the East Coast, it's a whole different mentality. You know, one agency's over here, others, and all are fighting. You know, just like Tom LaBonge knows from the history of Los Angeles, working together for the people is what it's all about, in the words of Tom LaBonge. Thank
And on that note, Mr. Tom LaBonge is in the room. And so, gentlemen, thank you very much again.
Is that receive and file action, Mr.?
Yes.
Englander? Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to go ahead and bring Councilman Tom LaBonge to the table on item 15, if we could. We're actually going
Radio
to,
1070.
we're going to bring 14 and 15 together. We'll take 15 out of order,
With the morning-
because we have the great Tom LaBonge.
You were very kind, Mitch and Councilman Englander. Thank you very much, Councilman Zine. I just wanted to stop by before, just the emphasis here. First thing, and Mitch, I would never say, you're too young to remember, but Dennis Zine, go back 45 years. What happened every last Friday of the month, 15 minutes for 9?
Air raid.
Air raid. And Jim Featherstone. You know, we talk about preparing people for this event, and hearing your comments. When an event happens, wherever the most serious activity is, that's where the resources are, and as it ripples out, it will be. So I think we should look at the last Friday of the month. I'm just saying that because I was listening to Mr. Zine speak.
I listened to you this morning, Ken.
Very good. I just listened to you right here. More people heard me on KNX than they hear you here, Denny, so get on the radio. But we should have once-a-month awareness for all emergencies. And 15, the windstorm, and I'm 58, I've lived here all my life, I've been, you know, very aware of all these tragedies. I don't think it was a 10-year windstorm. It was a once-in-my lifetime windstorm that impacted the community.
Well, come on up to the 12th District, to Porter Ranch, and we have it daily.
Absolutely, because you live high up in the North Ridge of Los Angeles. That being said, I think there should be my emphasis on the motion number 15, to do a documentation and a report, and also look at regionally. And I'm very thankful that the Department of Water and Power, no one got injured in Los Angeles in the tragedy, which was a very, very big trees falling, and the electricity and all that, and the work that they did to get it back on, and then Public Works, the work they did to cut and stack and then come back. I do not think, at least in my district, that there's a stack out there, and most everything's been picked up. There are some stumps. But I just want to make sure we document that, because it was an above-ground earthquake. And I don't know, Councilman Englander, and I know it does blow through the passes of Santa Clarita and the north end of the valley, but because of the age of the trees, whatever it was, through the Arroyo, through Griffith Park, down through Wilshire, it was there. So you got my message. Thank you very much. I'm going to proceed through business.
With that, I think it's a fantastic suggestion. In fact, this year we started on our Friday newsletter. We add emergency preparedness tips,
Right.
and then there's a new one every week, and then that is cumulative on the website at cd12.org.
Right.
So we're pushing that information out there. We're getting it to the public. I know you're doing the same. let's get together and encourage all of our colleagues to do the same thing.
I just think it's the last Friday of the month, and the thing that I haven't been successful, but if anybody within the sound of my voice could do this, and maybe the CLA here? Yeah, CLA here. What I'd like to see is a state law passed that the Board of Equalization would say any emergency preparedness equipment, and they could identify it, gets non-taxed on the last Friday of the month weekend, so we encourage Angelenos and all Southern Californians to have emergency preparedness equipment. In the South, which I haven't been to, but I am told that they do this because of hurricanes, like once a month. They say no taxes if you buy preparedness equipment on that. And that may be an idea to encourage. We lose a little sales tax, but we gain a lot of preparedness.
Well, as first responders, I think Mr. Zine and I will join you in looking for any opportunities to do those things, to sponsor any legislation, motions, outreach efforts, media, press events. We can't do enough to tell the people in Los Angeles to be prepared. So thank you. I appreciate
Very
you
quickly,
coming
I don't know,
to
Mitch,
me
if you knew that I wanted to be a first responder. In fact, 1974, I took the test to be a firefighter, Jim, at Hollywood High. Did you take yours at Hollywood High? Yes. Hollywood High. Jim passed the test. I didn't. And when I first got here, looking to the veteran guy, I told that to Mr. Zine. And then one day, about 6 months later, he got up in public and he said, and Tom LaBonge failed the fire department test. And I just jumped up and said, it shows you LAPD will take anybody.
Yeah. Oh.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Tom LaBonge.
On that note, even firefighters have heroes. They're called police officers.
All right.
No, I'm kidding. Okay, moving on to item, well, those were 14 and 15. Unless anybody has something to add to 14 and 15, gentlemen?
Chuck Trahal, Bureau of Sanitation, to report on the happened of the Bureau. For the windstorm, basically we relied on our call center 311 and the council district offices to tell us where there were a lot of extra debris down. We dispatched crews to those areas and picked up the debris.
Now, let me, I don't want to interrupt you, but I do want to ask a question that you just sparked my interest on.
Certainly.
311. We have, the city has cut back significantly on the hours of operation because of cost in 311, which I just personally completely disagree with. I think it's our first line of contact with residents and businesses and visitors that come to Los Angeles, that are here in Los Angeles, that need everything short of an emergency response, whether it's a tree down, whatever that might be, particularly in an emergency situation, so we don't overload 911. Is there a plan now that when we go on a citywide alert, when there's a major issue, when there's a major disaster, that no matter what those hours are, that we immediately staff up our 311 center as well, knowing that we're going to get that volume of information coming in?
Yes, sir, and that's what happened. We actually went to level 2, which is our second of 3 levels of activation. Level 2 activation of the city's EOC, and 311 was brought up to speed. It takes a call from us to the general manager of ITA.
Does 311 then kick in at a 24-hour plan to man those phones, to staff those phones, 24 hours during those situations when we hit level 2?
Yes, sir. Whatever hours, excuse me, it's not automatic when we go to level 2, but depending on what the situation is, and it's, like I said, it's just a phone call from the EOC to the general manager of ITA, and then they mobilize 311, and based on the issue or the event, we decide how long 311 will be up to maximum capacity. And that's what happened during the wind event. The EOC was activated before dawn on, I believe it was that Thursday morning, because of what had happened, overnight. And the EOC stayed up and activated for about 18 hours.
But what did we do with 311?
311 came up and actually ran 24 hours from the time of our activation until the next morning.
I was just going to mention DWP has 24/7.
Just state your name again for the record. Just
Randy Howard,
joining us at the table.
Department of Water and Power. The DWP has a 24/7 customer service operation call center that was, we had additional staff in preparation for what we knew was going to be a wind event. And so they also took the calls. When we did participate in the EOC and it was opened up, we were able to transfer additional information that might have been provided by a caller as to trees down. We could provide that then, and the balance of the city agencies could respond to that part of the need from the customer.
You run 24 hours all the time. water and power?
That is correct.
We normally have, if we do, actually even up to a level 3 activation, normally 2 DWP reps, so a water rep and a power rep. We had at one time, I believe it was about 7 DWP reps in the EOC. Folks from their crisis information team and also the operational folks from the water and power sides there.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. I think that should conclude the agenda.
Your action on 14 and 15 is?
To file.
Receive and file. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That does conclude the agenda.
This meeting's adjourned. We'll see you in council. Thank you.